Something changed without asking for permission. It didn't happen in front of you. It didn't happen in a moment designed to be remembered. It happened the way real turning points often happen, quietly, in the middle of a day that looked like every other day, inside a conversation that wasn't supposed to matter. At first, it sounded ordinary. Someone close to your daughter was talking the way people talk when they think they're only filling time. Small updates. A passing complaint. A few harmless details that didn't feel connected to anything bigger. Until your name entered the conversation. Not as a side note. Not as a casual mention. As a weight. The tone shifted so subtly that most people would miss it. A pause that lasted half a second too long. A sentence that started confidently, then broke off like the speaker suddenly remembered where the invisible line was. And right then, right there, your soulmate noticed the first sign that something existed in your daughter's life that hadn't reached you yet. Not because she's hiding you from it. Because she's trying to figure out what it is before she hands it to you. And that's the part nobody understands at the beginning. People always assume silence means distance. They assume if a daughter hasn't told you something, it must be because she doesn't trust you, or because she's afraid, or because she's choosing someone else over you. But your soulmate saw something different in that pause. They saw care. They saw the strange tenderness that shows up when someone is protecting a moment, not avoiding it. When someone is holding a truth in both hands and waiting until they can carry it without dropping it. Your soulmate didn't confront anyone. They didn't demand answers. They didn't make a scene out of a feeling. They just listened. And the more they listened, the more they realized this wasn't just one person knowing something you didn't. It was a pattern. Because the person close to your daughter, this first thread, wasn't acting like someone who had stumbled on gossip. They were acting like someone who had been asked to hold something carefully. They spoke like your reaction mattered. Like your response wasn't a footnote, but a chapter the story was moving toward. And that's the moment your soulmate began to sense the real shape of it. This wasn't information traveling randomly. This was something being carried, piece by piece, by different people, while your daughter tried to decide how to bring the whole thing home to you. Then your soulmate discovered the second layer, and it changed the meaning of everything. It happened in a different place, with a different person, in a conversation that wasn't even about your daughter, until suddenly it was. A name came up. Not your daughter's name. Yours. And your soulmate did something simple. They asked a careful question. Not a direct one. Not a question that would expose what they suspected. Something gentle. Something like, "Oh, does she know yet?" They expected confusion. They expected a blank stare. Instead, they got recognition. A look that said, "I know what you're referring to, even if you didn't say it out loud." A measured response that arrived too quickly for someone who didn't already have context. And then your soulmate felt that strange moment when the air in a room changes, when you realize you've just stepped into the edge of something that has been happening without you. Not in a way that excludes you. In a way that has been waiting for the right time to include you properly. Because the person your soulmate spoke to wasn't surprised by the question. They weren't startled. They were cautious. As if they knew exactly how delicate the next few days could become, depending on what was said and when. And then came the part that made your soulmate's chest tighten. This person wasn't just aware that something was unfolding. They were aware that multiple people were already holding different fragments. Meaning it had traveled farther than anyone expected. Meaning your daughter wasn't standing alone in her uncertainty. Meaning there was a circle around her. Not a circle meant to keep you out. A circle meant to keep her steady until she could speak. Your soulmate didn't tell you immediately. They didn't rush home with a dramatic announcement. Because they didn't actually know the truth yet. They only knew this. Your daughter was at the center of something in motion, and the people around her were acting like your response would be an event in itself. Why would it matter that much? Why would it matter enough that grown adults were choosing their words carefully, as if they could bruise something just by naming it? That question is where the real story begins. Because when you follow that question, you realize something. Your daughter's silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of trying. Full of rehearsed beginnings. Full of endings she hasn't decided how to shape yet. And your soulmate began to understand that maybe she wasn't thinking, should I tell you? Maybe she was thinking, what will happen to us after I do? There is a difference. A secret keeps people out. A preparation keeps something safe until it can be held with two hands instead of one. And your soulmate started seeing signs of preparation everywhere. It showed up in the smallest details. A future date mentioned like an unfinished sentence. A time marker that appeared in two different conversations with two different people, without your daughter present. At first, it sounded like coincidence. People mention dates all the time. But then your soulmate heard it again. The same date. The same, we'll talk about it after. The same careful phrasing, not yet. Two different people. Same invisible boundary. And that was the moment coincidence stopped being a believable explanation. Because if two people are carrying the same unfinished detail, it means someone gave it a place to live. Your soulmate didn't become suspicious. They became precise. They started noticing what everyone else overlooked, not what was being said, but what was being protected. Someone knew how it started. Someone knew why she hesitated. Someone knew what the original plan looked like. And somewhere beyond all of them was one unexpected person who seemed to know what might happen next. That last part landed differently. Because knowing how something begins is one kind of knowledge. Knowing what might happen next means you've been invited into the future version of the story. And your soulmate realized that whoever this unexpected person was, they weren't just a listener. They were connected. So your soulmate followed the trail carefully, like someone tracing a river upstream without splashing. And eventually, they found the clue that changed the entire timeline. It wasn't a name at first. It was a question. Someone said, almost casually, "Does she know yet?" They didn't mean your daughter. They meant you. And they said it like it was normal for you to be the final person to hear something. That one sentence rearranged everything. Because why would someone, not even the closest person to your daughter, be wondering if you'd been told? Why would you be the measurement? Why would your knowing be the moment people were tracking? Your soulmate didn't answer. They didn't reveal what you knew or didn't know. They just stored it. And in that moment, they started seeing what was really happening. Your daughter wasn't simply carrying a truth. She was carrying the timing of it. And timing is not the same as secrecy. Sometimes timing is love. Sometimes it's respect. Sometimes it's fear of losing something precious if the words arrive too early and land wrong. Your soulmate began hearing about the first person who noticed the shift, someone who was never supposed to be part of it at all. That's what made it so strange. The earliest person wasn't a best friend. It wasn't a sibling. It wasn't the person everyone assumes a daughter would confide in first. It was someone who observed her. Someone who noticed her life changing before she could name the change. Because there are moments when a person transforms internally long before they can explain anything externally. Their priorities shift. Their patience changes. They stop speaking about the future the way they used to. They start choosing words like they're practicing a new language. And people who are paying attention, people who have seen them in many seasons, notice. This earliest person didn't know, because your daughter sat them down and confessed. They knew because they watched her become different. And once your soulmate saw that, they stopped asking, "What are they keeping from you?" They started asking, "What are they preparing you for?" That single shift in perspective changed the emotional meaning of everything. Because now all the silences made sense. People weren't racing to tell you because they didn't want to steal her moment. They weren't speaking because they were waiting for the story to reach you the way your daughter wanted it to. And your soulmate realized something else. Whenever your name entered any of these conversations, the atmosphere didn't become cold. It became careful. As if everyone knew one thing with certainty: what happens after you know will matter as much as what you're about to learn. That's not how people behave when they're hiding something out of selfishness. That's how people behave when a relationship is involved, and they can feel how easily it could be misunderstood if the wrong person delivers the wrong sentence. Then your soulmate uncovered the detail that almost slipped past them. The person close to your daughter, this first thread, mentioned something that sounded insignificant. A place. Not a dramatic place. Not a public stage. A familiar place. A place that meant nothing to anyone else. But your soulmate noticed it because it didn't match the tension of the situation. If your daughter was going to say something life-altering, why choose somewhere ordinary? Unless ordinary was the point. Unless she wasn't trying to impress you. Unless she was trying to remember you. To sit somewhere that still felt like the two of you before the world complicated everything. Your soulmate held on to that detail, because it explained something they'd been unable to explain before. Your daughter wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing for closeness. And that's when your soulmate learned something else, something that changed the entire moral weight of the story. The person closest to your daughter had been asked not to tell you. Not to hint. Not to prepare you. Not to soften it. And the reason wasn't manipulation. It was ownership. Your daughter wanted to tell you herself. She wanted your first encounter with the whole truth to be untouched by anyone else's interpretation. Suddenly, the fact that people knew before you didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like coordination. Not a conspiracy against you. A protection around her courage. And then the next contradiction appeared. Someone, one of the people already holding a fragment, was confident they knew what your daughter had decided. They were speaking like the decision was locked. Like the future was already chosen and only waiting to be announced. But your soulmate noticed something that didn't match that certainty. Your daughter had stopped talking like someone who was still considering that path. One plan had disappeared from her language. And another possibility had quietly taken its place. No dramatic declaration. No loud correction. Just absence. Just replacement. And that's how your soulmate realized something crucial. Some people around your daughter were working with an older version of the story. They thought they knew. But they didn't know it had changed. Because your daughter had changed it privately, after the circle formed, after the fragments were already distributed. She didn't broadcast the update. She kept it. And that meant there was now a detail that none of them could give you, even if they tried. Only she could. Your soulmate found the moment the shift happened. Not because it was marked by fireworks, but because it was connected to you. A conversation involving you. Not one you remember as monumental. Maybe you said something simple. Something like, "You don't have to have everything figured out to make a good choice." Or, "Just make sure it's yours." Or, "I'll love you even when I don't understand you immediately." You moved on with your day. But your daughter didn't. She carried that sentence like an object in her pocket. And later, when she stood at the edge of a decision that was bigger than she expected, your words returned. Not as advice. As permission to trust herself. And that possibility made your soulmate go still, because it meant something beautiful and painful at the same time. You may have influenced a decision you never knew existed. And now your daughter might be preparing to tell you not only what she chose, but that you were part of why she could choose it at all. Imagine what that does to a person's courage. Imagine how heavy it feels to approach someone and say, "You don't know this, but you helped me become braver." Imagine the vulnerability of saying, "I remembered you in the moment I changed." And your soulmate realized that might be why she waited. Not because she couldn't find the words. Because she couldn't find an ending. She didn't just want to say the truth. She wanted to know what would happen afterward. Because afterward is where relationships either widen or fracture. And your daughter doesn't want fracture. She wants evolution. Then your soulmate heard about a moment that made everything feel closer. Your daughter asked when you would be available. Not a dramatic request. Not a grand setup. Just a question that sounded casual enough to fool anyone who wasn't listening with a heart. But your soulmate noticed the timing. After the circle of fragments. After the "not yet." After the place was chosen. After the original plan quietly disappeared. Why now? Because maybe she finally crossed the invisible line where waiting starts to hurt more than speaking. Because at some point, silence becomes heavier than honesty. And when that happens, conversations move toward the door on their own. Your soulmate also learned something else. Your daughter asked someone close to her how to say something important when you don't know how the other person will react. That question is so human it almost hurts. Because it's not a question asked by someone plotting. It's a question asked by someone who cares about the relationship enough to fear damaging it with the wrong opening sentence. But here's what matters most: when she was offered suggested words, she rejected them. Because she didn't want a script that belonged to someone else. She wanted her own voice. That is how your soulmate knew the moment wasn't hypothetical anymore. She wasn't gathering options. She was shaping truth. And then your soulmate uncovered the identity of the unexpected person. The one who knew the updated version. The one who corrected someone repeating the older story. The one who somehow had access to the future-facing piece. This person wasn't part of the original circle, and that was intentional. Your daughter kept them outside the early conversations for a reason. Because this person wasn't meant to help her decide. They were meant to be contacted after you knew. After. That order mattered more than anyone realized. Because if she's choosing to speak to someone else only after she speaks to you, it means your conversation is not just a reveal. It's a foundation. Something in the next chapter depends on how the two of you walk out of that room. Not on whether you agree with every detail. Not on whether you understand it instantly. But on whether you can stay connected while she becomes someone new. That's why your reaction has been living inside other people's mouths. That's why they keep pausing when your name enters the air. Because they can all sense it, your daughter isn't only telling you something. She's asking you for something. Not permission. Not approval. A signal. A sign that the relationship can stretch without breaking. Your soulmate learned that this unexpected person asked a question that finally clarified what the after might be about. They didn't ask, "What is she going to tell you?" They asked, "Will you be part of what happens next?" And when your soulmate heard that, their whole understanding shifted again. Because now the future piece came into focus. Whatever your daughter is preparing to say may not only change her life. It may be opening into something where you still have a place. Not as a witness standing far away. As someone invited to stand nearer than anyone expected. And suddenly, the familiar place she chose for your conversation made perfect sense. She's not preparing a dramatic announcement. She's preparing a bridge. She wants to begin somewhere that still feels like the two of you before the world adds its noise. And now, your soulmate noticed another subtle change. Your daughter stopped asking people what you might say. That question used to hover around her like a nervous habit. What do you think they'll do? What do you think they'll say? What if they don't understand? And then, it stopped. Almost like she finally accepted something simple and frightening. You can't rehearse someone else's heart. You can't control their first reaction. You can only choose honesty and trust the relationship enough to survive the first wave of emotion. That's what it looks like when someone becomes ready. Not because the outcome is guaranteed. Because courage finally outweighs comfort. Then your soulmate heard about a sentence your daughter shared with the unexpected person, something that sounded small, but carried the shape of the entire story. She described the response she hopes to hear from you. Not agreement. Not instant celebration. Not perfect understanding. Just one sign. That you're listening. That you're staying. That you're not leaving the conversation the moment it gets hard. Because she doesn't expect you to absorb the whole truth in one breath. She just wants the doorway to remain open after the first sentence. And that's when your soulmate understood what nobody else seemed to understand. The turning point won't be the secret itself. The turning point will be the seconds after. Those few seconds when your daughter will look at your face and decide what your silence means. Those few seconds when the relationship will either tighten with fear or soften with trust. Those few seconds when the past and future will both be asking the same question: are we still safe with each other now that something is changing? Your soulmate began to see why so many people could know pieces and still miss the meaning. They were collecting information. Your daughter was building a moment. And a moment like this isn't built out of facts alone. It's built out of fear, love, timing, memory, and the quiet hope that the person you love will recognize you even as you change. Then your soulmate finally discovered who knew first, and the answer didn't feel like drama. It felt like tenderness. The earliest person was someone who noticed your daughter changing not through confession, but through behavior. They saw her become more intentional. They saw her step away from certain conversations. They saw her choose her words more carefully. They saw her stop laughing at jokes that no longer fit her. They saw her future rearranging itself behind her eyes. And they noticed something else. Your daughter kept returning to something you once said. A sentence she carried longer than anyone knew. Not a famous quote. Not a grand speech. Something you said on an ordinary day. Something that became extraordinary only later, when she needed it. And this earliest person realized those words were acting like an anchor. That's how they knew the story started earlier than anyone understood. Because the story wasn't born from one secret. It was born from a transformation. And transformations don't begin with announcements. They begin in the private place where a person admits, even to themselves, that the old plan no longer fits. Your soulmate finally saw the chain clearly. The person close to your daughter noticed the beginning. Another person heard the middle. Someone else held the original version. The unexpected person knew the revised direction. And the earliest observer saw the change before it had a name. And then there was you, intentionally left untouched by everyone else's wording, because your daughter wanted the full story to arrive with her voice attached to it. Now your soulmate isn't trying to solve the mystery anymore. They know they can't. Because the last piece isn't hidden in someone else's mouth. It's in your daughter's. It's in the way she plans to begin. It's in the reason she changed direction. It's in the part nobody else has, the private choice she made while everyone else was still guessing. Even the people who know something don't know everything. Not the closest friend. Not the early observer. Not the unexpected person waiting for the after. And that might be exactly what your daughter wanted. Because too many voices can weaken a decision before it has time to become strong. Too much commentary can turn a brave truth into a public object. Your daughter didn't want that. She wanted one part of her life to remain hers until she could place it directly in your hands. Then your soulmate learned something that made their throat tighten. Your daughter has imagined the conversation with you more than once. Not in one perfect version. In many. Different timing. Different openings. Different endings. Different versions of your face. Different versions of your reaction. Because when someone's love is deep, they don't just fear rejection. They fear change. They fear the moment when the relationship becomes unfamiliar. So your daughter didn't delay because you were unimportant. She delayed because you were too important to approach with half-formed certainty. And then, quietly, she decided how she wants the conversation to end. Not with a conclusion about her. With a question for you. A question that contains the real heart of all of this. Not, do you approve? Not, are you happy? Not, can I do it? Something far more personal. Can you see me as I am becoming, not only as I have been? That's the question hiding underneath all the fragments people have been carrying. That's why your name shifts the room. That's why people speak carefully. That's why the place chosen is familiar. That's why she asked others not to tell you first. Because she doesn't want a fight. She wants to be known. She wants to step into the next chapter without losing the thread that connects her back to you. And here is the final shift your soulmate noticed before any new words were spoken. Your daughter's uncertainty is gone. Not because she suddenly knows exactly what you'll say. Because she finally accepted that she can't control that part. She can only control one thing, whether she chooses honesty now. And she has. So the circle around her has started to step back. The closest friend stops asking questions. As if they can feel the moment is no longer theirs to hold. The person with the older version of the story grows quiet, as if they realize their confidence was built on an outdated map. The unexpected person waiting for the after becomes patient, as if they understand that nothing moves forward until you and your daughter speak first. Even your soulmate, who traced every fragment, has stopped searching. Because there is nothing left to uncover that would matter more than the way your daughter will look at you when she begins. The mystery has reached its natural end. Not because everyone finally knows. But because the next step belongs to the one person who has been carrying the complete meaning all along. Your daughter. And very soon, in the place she chose for a reason she hasn't explained to anyone, she will sit across from you and start with a sentence that may sound smaller than the truth behind it. You may feel the urge to interrupt. To fix it. To make it less scary. To jump to an ending. But remember what your soulmate learned by watching the fragments travel: the first sentence won't be the whole story. It will be the doorway. And your daughter didn't wait because she wanted drama. She waited because she wanted you to meet her in the truth without anyone else standing between you. She waited because she didn't want to give you a possibility. She wanted to give you her decision. She waited because she wanted to bring you the complete version, beginning, turning point, revision, and the future she sees now. And when she finally speaks, there is a chance, quiet, powerful, and real, that you will hear your own words returning to you. Something you once said without knowing it would live inside her. Something she carried into her turning point when nobody else was there. And if that happens, you'll understand something that changes the meaning of every silence. You were never outside this story. You were part of it before you knew it had begun. Because the people who knew fragments weren't standing ahead of you. They were standing around a moment that was always meant to come home. Now the moment is almost here. Not because the secret is forcing itself into the light, but because your daughter has stopped needing certainty to choose honesty. She is ready. And the real revelation won't be the thing she tells you. It will be what she asks for afterward. A bridge. A relationship that can grow without breaking. A future where she can step forward as herself and still feel you beside her, not behind her, not in the way, beside her. So when the conversation begins, listen beyond the shock of the first detail. Listen beyond the urge to label it quickly. Let her unfold it in order. Let the second part explain the first. Let the third part transform what you thought you heard at the beginning. Because all this time, everyone has been asking the wrong question. Not, who knows? Not, why didn't she tell you?